So we're going to be looking at the LEQ or long essay question rubric that's used to grade the AP history exams. And so the one that I have here, I have color coded. We're going to use this color coding system as you work on grading an essay. So let's go through the rubric to make sure that we understand the points. So the first point that you get is for having a thesis statement. This is why we've been working on thesis statements during Unit 2. So to earn the point for thesis statement, your thesis has to respond to the prompt with a historically defensible claim. And so the prompt that we're going to be looking at, let me show that to you really quick, is evaluate the extent to which commercial exchange systems such as mercantilism fostered change in the British North American economy in the period 1660 to 1775. So we're looking at how systems like mercantilism changed the economy in the 13 colonies, to kind of sum that up. So it says on our rubric that to earn this point, that the thesis must make a claim and it cannot merely restate the prompt. So if the thesis statement said mercantilism changed the British North American economy, that would not answer the prompt. That would simply be restating the prompt. To answer the prompt, the thesis statement needs to give reasons why that it changed the economy. That's why thesis statements typically have 3 parts. Those 3 parts would be explaining how the economy was changed. The thesis statement is usually located, and I want you to locate it when you write essays, as the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. So you can think of these essays like 5-paragraph essays. Sometimes they'll be more like 4-paragraph essays, but your thesis statement should always be the last sentence of the introduction. So before your thesis statement in the introduction, you're going to have a few lines of contextualization. And context, just like when we do HIP, when we're looking at primary sources, and the H stands for historical context, it's describing the larger historical events that are taking place. To earn this point, you have to explain the events that are happening around the time period that they give you in the prompt. It's not awarded for merely a phrase or a reference, so context would need to be multiple sentences, generally 3 to 5 sentences. And so your context in your thesis should make up the first paragraph. So if the first paragraph has both of those things, the essay would be at a 2 out of 6. And then you can earn up to 2 points for evidence. The first point is just providing specific examples of evidence that are relevant to the topic of the prompt. I call this name dropping. These should be like buzzwords. So this is why we do anchor points, so that you know about specific events and people and places. And so this is where you name drop. You are giving specific people or events, things like that, that are relevant to whatever the topic of the prompt is. You get 1 point if you have what I call those buzzwords. But in order to get to the second point, where you're supporting your argument with those pieces of evidence, you should be able to explain what those buzzwords are. So instead of just name dropping, you should be able to explain what an event was. So for example, one of your last anchor points was the Pequot War. Instead of just saying, the Pequot War in an essay, you would go into detail about who it was fought between and what the effects of that war was, and that would help you get that second piece of evidence. So you would earn both those points. The last 2 points are analysis and reasoning. So you get the first point for using a historical reasoning skill to frame the structure of your argument. And it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty easy. So when the essay is written, do they write it in a comparison type style where they're comparing 2 things? Are they writing it and explaining what caused an event? Or are they using continuity and change over time? Are they analyzing in their essay how things changed over time or how things stayed the same over time? The second point and the last point for this is my least favorite, because it's often hard to earn and it's often hard to identify. But can you demonstrate a complex understanding of the historical development that's the focus of the prompt, so in this case mercantilism, by basically extending the argument further? And over here, it gives several different ways of how you could earn this point. You could look at an issue by analyzing multiple variables. And so, for example, in the essay that I'm about to show you, they not only talk about economics, but they're also going to talk about environmental factors. And so they get the last point because that's a different variable. Or in an essay, maybe you are looking at what's different between two things. You could also talk about what was similar. Instead of just looking at change over time, you could look at continuity and change over time to earn the point. Instead of just looking at causes, you could analyze causes and effects. You could also make connections across time periods to extend your argument. So if you're talking about something in Unit 2, maybe you would extend it to something in Unit 4 or Unit 5, which you can't really do now, but you will be able to at the end of the class. You can also confirm the validity of an argument by looking at multiple perspectives, or you can qualify or modify your argument by considering a diverse or alternative point of view. So there's several ways that you can earn this point, and we'll work on it. Okay, so having our color-coded rubric ready, let's look at an example. So this is an example essay. The one that I'm giving you is typed so you could read it a little bit easier. So this is a sample student response. And as you can see, I put their context in green. It's the first few sentences of their essay, and they are setting the context and the bigger historical picture by saying many European powers in the 18th century traveled to the Americas in search of great economic opportunities. The French, the Dutch, and the Spanish all came implementing their own ways of gaining money. The Spanish relied on the encomienda system, invoking hard labor to meet the needs of production on sugar plantations. This all conforms with the mercantilist system, which stressed that colonies' main function was to profit the mother country. That's their context, and then in their thesis, they're answering the prompt. Commercial exchange systems like mercantilism drastically fostered change in the British North American economy by firmly implementing regional and sectional differences. That's their first argument. 2, by transforming the system by which work gets done. And 3, by dramatically changing the population and ecosystem of North America. So they've got 3 parts to their thesis statement, and their thesis is the last sentence of the intro. So I'm not going to read this entire paragraph to you, but I want to point out how they're giving specific pieces of evidence. They gave northern states like Massachusetts. They talk about the southern colonies, and then they're going to tie in Virginia to that, and they're going to extend their evidence by not just listing these things, but explaining how they're looking at sectional differences. They're going to explain how the northern states were different from the southern colonies. And so they're going to earn both of the points by being able to do that, by not just name dropping, but being able to explain that these colonies were different and here is why. So think about that second evidence point as the why behind it. And then the orange was structuring your argument with a historical reasoning skill. And we see this here where they're looking at change over time. They say the regional differences would affect the future United States far beyond this time period, as the state's reliance on agriculture means that there was no need to industrialize. So it's talking about the South relied on agriculture, and they relied on slave labor, and this would eventually lead to the Civil War. And so we're looking at change over time. They would earn that point. If we look at their third body paragraph, where they're exploring the changes in the ecosystem, this is where they earn the last point for extending their argument, because instead of just talking about how the economies were changed, they're talking about how the environment and the colonies were changed as well. So with that information, you're going to use your color-coded rubric to grade the essay that is on Google Classroom. I put the prompt on here for you. And what you're going to do is you're reading this essay is you're going to color code it like I did the sample one. Yours will have more color on it because I didn't want to read the whole essay to you during the video. So you're going to use the highlighting feature on a Google document. If you come up here, you can use highlight color. So for example, I'm going to help you out here. I know that this is answering the prompt, the last sentence of their intro, so I know it's their thesis statement, and I know that I'm using red for thesis, so I can go ahead and highlight that in red. And so you're going to use the highlighting feature in order to highlight your points. So after you grade and you've color coded the essay, you're going to come down here and put what the total score is that you gave it. And remember, this is out of 6. So maybe this is a 6 out of 6. Maybe it's a 5 out of 6. Maybe it's a 2 out of 6. And then when we meet on our Zoom meeting Tuesday after Labor Day, we'll discuss what score the essay actually got.